prepared.
I came with the questions just so.
Yes.
I would just read from that. Oh, exactly. That's probably the best thing. I would just be like, I'm going to just show a video the whole time. Exactly. Seems like that would keep everyone's attention. Episode of Mr. Robot or something.
Hi. How's it going, Jesse?
Jesse.
Nice to meet you.
How you doing? Daniel. Oh, I know. I always
very good
stuff too.
Yeah.
What do you think is one side?
So where do you work?
Outline almost.
I'm a data scientist.
We're going to get started in about 5 minutes.
Develop model.
So if you want to wrap up your networking conversations and get a seat, there's quite a few up here.
I work at Curio. We make clinical and business management software for doctors and independent practice.
Oh, I see. Yeah, it's like healthy.
Have all you guys introduce yourself.
Healthcare, yep.
Okay.
Exactly, yeah. So my world is HIPAA and things like that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice, nice.
I'll have you guys introduce yourselves once
Okay.
we get going.
Okay.
Since I have no bio information.
Oh, they didn't.
Well, I mean, it's on the invitation, but
Okay.
when we took over on the call and they said you guys were introducing yourselves, I couldn't print it out.
Are you doing any background or just
I
a
was
minute?
just gonna kick it off real quickly and then have you introduce yourselves. Kick it off just with a little quick story, and then I was just gonna go right into that question of key trends.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, if any of you guys want to make opening remarks, that's fine too.
Okay.
I think we can pretty much do what we want.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I would have any opening remarks, but
Just our name.
Do my brief
What? Oh, sure. Yeah.
Out to the lobby. We've set up some partition walls and some sound blockers
If you guys are interested in continuing networking, we'd just love if you guys could head out to the lobby. Otherwise, there's still a lot of seating up here, front row, second row, third row. So go ahead and take a seat. We have our panelists ready to go as well. My name is Chelsea Villalobos. I am one of the organizers for Tech in Motion Orange County. We're really excited to have you guys all out here this evening for this event. You may notice we have 4 out of the 5 speakers right now. I promised one of them, he's on his way, he's from LA, so he's in traffic, and hopefully he'll be coming in at some point during this panel. So to get started, we just have a few announcements. And then I'll just wait a little bit. Okay. Just have a few announcements. Tonight's event would not be possible without Workbridge Associates and JobSpring Partners. We're IT staffing agencies located in 11 cities across North America. Here in Irvine, we have a location. We specialize in contract to hire and permanent placements for IT professionals. So if you're looking for a new opportunity, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to let you know about the clients we're working with and those opportunities. On the flip side, we sit down with anywhere between 40 to 50 tech candidates every week combined with both of our offices who are either passively looking or actively looking for their next opportunity. So if you have a hard-to-fill position on your team right now, and you're looking for someone, feel free to reach out to us. We can let you know about the candidates we're representing, and we'd love to partner up. And then as far as the event goes tonight, after we introduce our moderator, he'll kick it off here. We'll have about 45 minutes of panel discussion, 40 to 45 minutes. After that, we'll go ahead and do a Q&A. So if you have any questions, write those down, jot those down. We'll be passing around mics at the end of the evening, if you have any questions for any of the panelists. And the event ends at 8:30. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Harrison.
Hey everyone, my name is Harrison. I'm another event organizer for Tech in Motion. I just want to take a quick minute to invite you all to next month's event. It's going to be an intro to esports, and it's going to be at the UCI Esports Arena, which opened up recently across the street. It's going to be from 6 to 8:30 on March 23rd. And there's going to be live demos, there's going to be open opportunity for free play, and there's going to be a keynote speech from Mark Depp, who's the acting director of the esports arena. And now I'm going to introduce our moderator for the evening, Bryan Cunningham. Bryan currently serves as the executive director of the UCI Cybersecurity Policy and Research Institute. He's a cybersecurity and privacy lawyer who has advised clients on data and critical infrastructure protection and privacy programs. He also serves as Deputy Legal Advisor to Coldoleezza Rice, where he helped develop the first national strategy for securing cyberspace. Please join me in welcoming Bryan.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you guys for coming. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the free booze outside, but I hope you loaded up on it because I'm going to be super boring. I just thought it'd be nice if we could just all gather around the fire right here. Maybe that would be a little more homey. Okay, before we get started, I'm going to ask each one of our panelists. We have an excellent, distinguished, highly experienced, and varied viewpoints panel. So I'm going to just ask everyone to introduce themselves, starting with Jesse.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jesse Salmon. I work with Cario, and we make cloud-based clinical and business management software. My world now is in the healthcare security space. I focus a lot with HIPAA. In addition to that, cybersecurity frameworks like High Trust, which is something I think we'll probably bring up a couple of times tonight. So look forward to talking to all of you. Thank you. Great. Lee.
Hi, my name is Lee. Now I'm a data scientist at Silence. My teammate and I, we are using machine learning algorithm to build models to detect malwares. Before joining Silence, I work on my PhD at UCI in physics department, working on the development of machine learning algorithms in density functional theory. I'm also active on online data science competitions. On Kaggle, which is the largest data science competition platform, I rank 85 globally among 500,000 data scientists.
Great. Daniel.
Hey guys, thanks for having me here. My name is Daniel Di Carvalho. I'm also known as the fur-bearing mammal, the Yeti, raccoon, whatever you want to call me, but call me something. So I am actually a member of the Global Cash Card cybersecurity team. Global Cash Card is a large player in the payroll, pay card industry, pretty much like ADP. And securing Global Cash Card and its data and its users is what I do. It's what keeps me up at night. And it's a great pleasure to be here. I am from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, born and raised there, been here for 10 years. And I think that being from Rio de Janeiro, being from Brazil, has enabled me to kind of look at cybersecurity in two different perspectives from two different countries and how cultural nuances kind of either hinder or actually promote cybersecurity. So it's a very fun time to be here with you guys.
Great, thanks. And Aaron Guzman, who I guess just got off the traffic highway from LA. Good time.
For 2.5 hours.
That's dedication.
Long time. I was racing to get over here. I used to work right next door at Linksys, so I work from home now from the drive time. But anyhow, so my name's Aaron Guzman. I'm actually a board member for OWASP Los Angeles, Cloud Security Alliance, Southern California. I'm a pen tester by day. I do a lot of IoT research in the consumer space, connected vehicles, smart home products, doorbells, smart locks, a lot of those type of products. I also contribute to a lot of open source projects and guidance documents around IoT and embedded software. So I lead a project called Embedded Application Security for OWASP. So if any of you guys are interested in like medical device or just embedded devices themselves, embedded Linux, just about to publish version 1, and the more eyes, the better. So if anybody's interested, feel free to ping me. But again, as far as my background, just heavily into application security as a whole. So that's web application security, mobile application security, iOS and Android, APIs, REST and SOAP, and then embedded device, so hardware hacking, and then wireless as well. Just to kind of sum it up, fast as I can, I'm still kind of out of breath.
Excellent. Well, thanks for making the extra sacrifice. I want to, first of all, just apologize that we're having this event at a time when there's not much to talk about in cybersecurity, but we'll try to fill the 45 minutes as best we can. I know I'm hiding it well, but I'm actually a little older than most of the folks on the panel. I'm hiding it because I took off my business casual sport coat and put it back on the chair. But 12 years ago, I was involved in writing the first legal and ethics chapters in some internet security textbooks. There was really not much of a practice of cybersecurity law back then. And I just tell this story to illustrate how things have changed. Oh, by the way, the book is still available on Amazon. It's like number 3,404,000 or something. But in this book, in order to kind of liven things up in the legal chapter, we started with a hypothetical. And the hypothetical was, this was written in 2004, the hypothetical was, it's January of 2009, and newly elected President Hillary Clinton has just taken office. So we only missed that by 8 years and 324 electoral votes, or sorry, 34 electoral votes. And she's faced with what appears to be a cascading attack on the power grid. And so she has to decide with her advisors, is this a bunch of kids in the basement? Is it an accident? Is it a foreign government? Is it a terrorist organization? How serious is it? Is it even real? The point of the story is I had two co-authors on that chapter, and they were both experts in cybersecurity at the time. And the idea that in the foreseeable future an adversary could affect the physical world through cyberspace was so controversial that there's a footnote in the book that says that the three authors couldn't agree on whether or not this would be possible in the foreseeable future. So this is pre-Stuxnet, it's pre-North Korea Sony, it's pre-the DDos attacks that took down the entire government of Liberia's internet, etc. So what a difference a decade makes, just for perspective. So we have a great cross-section of expertise here, and we have a lot of great topics to talk about. I just wanted to start out by the standard question, and that is to ask each of our panelists to talk about what they see as the most important relevant trends in cybersecurity starting this year. And we can talk about, anyone can talk about anything they want, but Daniel, I thought I'd start with you, and if you wanted to comment on some trends in financial transactions, payment methods, et cetera.
Awesome. So, as you all know, I'm from the financial sector, and being part of security in the financial sector, you can imagine that it's quite an interesting job, huh? We see a sheer volume of attacks on a day-to-day basis, and we get to play with all the latest tools and gadgets to augment our security practice. At the end of the day, it's a lot of work. So a couple of trends which I'm going to be talking about tonight, I would say they're not new trends, but actually trends which are coming into more relevance now in the financial industry in terms of payment and securing transactions. I would like to first talk about a concept that we're seeing more of. It's called tokenization. So for those that are not familiar with the concept, tokenization is where you get a surrogate value. So you transform your card number, your PAN, your primary account number, the 16 digits of your credit card, if it's 16, and you kind of create a mapping to a surrogate value that has no identification to the actual PAN itself. And instead of storing the 16 digits credit card number in your databases and systems, you store this token. So where is this coming into relevance now? As you all know, there's so many companies being breached and hacked nowadays that storing credit card in your databases and in your systems, even in encrypted form, are starting to become more and more of a liability. So there's a great technology out there of tokenization, which is actually changing a lot of how these systems are architected. There are also like payment, there are actually tokenization gateways, which they will intercept the card right before it's coming into your organization and tokenize it. So a live card never makes it through your system and it's stored there. So there's zero liability, it reduces your PCI scope. So that's the great beauty of tokenization. And we're seeing more and more adoption to this. And of course, you know, we're talking about the financial system, which you got to understand that we have companies which are on the bleeding edge, and you've got companies which are very archaic and very hard and very slow to transform and change. So we're seeing a lot more adoption of that, and that's something very good because it keeps companies off the spotlight, correct? And kind of taking in the same level or the same trend of tokenization, another thing that we've been seeing a lot more of is using mobile payment. So we see that organizations are investing in wearables, be it IoT devices like your smart rings to make payments, be it your phones through Apple Pay, Android Pay, whatever platform you're using. We're seeing more and more of that because we are, believe it or not, of course you guys all know, we are in an interconnected world. We expect now that everything is interconnected. We look at our thermostat, we need to be able to interconnect with it. And the same trend we're seeing also in the payment industry. They're saying, if I can control all of this with my phone or my smart device or my IoT device, why can't I make payments? And that brings a lot of challenges to us. We're securing it, making sure privacy is ensured, making sure that we're able to track these transactions, hold them accountable, and all sorts of other spaces. Another thing that we've been seeing here in the financial industry is the adoption of the EMV cards, which are those smart chip cards. And unfortunately, the United States is one of the last countries to actually adopt that. EMV came to solve a myriad of different issues which are present on the magnetic stripe cards. But unfortunately, we're still in its infancy here in the United States. It's really known as the chip and pin technology, but we're on the chip and sign technology right now. So we're kind of in that gray area where we're not really getting the extent of what EMV is supposed to provide us. And not only that, but we're seeing more and more companies mandated by the government to adopt EMV, whereas they will get these EMV devices, but the configuration of these devices are still kind of left open. So they're all ready for encryption, but maybe the encryption flag is not turned on. And that's quite interesting because this EMV also brings it up to a different perspective of liability. You see, there's a liability shift in all of this. Whereas before, the payment processors, the banks would eat up all the fraud. Now, who eats up the fraud would be the person that is least EMV compliant. and sometimes that's a merchant. So that is changing a lot of how companies are envisioning security and how they're kind of more proactively taking a stance on securing their endpoints. Just last but not least, another thing we've been seeing a lot of is the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning in transactions to detect and deter fraud. So that is something that it is not new, but it is something that's augmenting that decision, and it's something very interesting to see where it's it's leading to. So I know we all here make a lot of use of machine learning and those things. We'll see that Lee is going to talk heavily about that. But it's interesting that we're all here. We're from different verticals, from different industries. But in the end of the day, we have the same mission. We're securing something, be it EPHI, which is patient information, be it cardholder data, be it PII, be it whatever type of asset. We're seeing that we got the same mission. And last but not least, also, we're seeing something that really scares the financial institute, or the financial institutions and the industry as a whole. It's what they call blockchain. Blockchain payments is the cryptographic peer-to-peer transactions, which basically take out the middleman out of the picture. And that is scaring the financial institutions because banks like to be in control. They want all the transactions to go to them. So when you're decentralizing this is something that's really scaring the industry, but also it's an opportunity to actually jump on the bandwagon and kind of see a way to interact with this, because believe it or not, this is the future of how things are going to go. And those are the trends that I've been seeing in the financial institute.
That's super helpful. Thanks. So you're, as most security engineers are, you're a little bit of a glass half empty kind of guy. I'm a little bit more of a glass half full kind of guy. And I just want everyone to understand that even though most merchants are not enabling encryption on the EMV cards, luckily at CVS and Ralph's, they do put the duct tape over the chip reader slot so that you still get to slide it using the old school technology.
Yeah.
So you actually provided a great segue into machine learning. So Lee, maybe talk a little bit about what you're seeing in machine learning and cybersecurity, whether in the financial payments area or any other.
Okay. In Silence, we mainly try to detect those malwares. We have a team with a lot of good security researchers. They research the behavior of all those malwares on different platforms and provide information, so domain knowledge to us. For our team, as data scientists, we mainly treat it as a machine learning problem. So for each malware or good file, any file, we will map it to a higher dimensional space, not 100 dimensional or thousands. It's like tens of millions dimensional. So each file will become a vector in high dimensional space. Then we try to use those existing algorithms or build up our own novel algorithms for supervised learning and sometimes unsupervised learning to classify which file is good or not. For that malware data set itself is quite an interesting problem in the machine learning point of view, because when you map data in that high dimensional space, you can see the space is very sparse. But for each specific family of malware, locally they are quite dense. So your machine learning algorithm need to find a way to balance this sparsity and the dense locally behavior. In our group, we have people from variety of background. So I'm from theoretical physics. We also have people from mathematics using their way, try to think about new algorithm. We have people from computer science. We have people from electrical engineering and statistics. We use a different background thinking to think about the same problem. And I think we do pretty good now for the accuracy. Also, I think it's not only apply machine learning to cybersecurity to solve those malware detection problems. What we also do is we use that cybersecurity data set, try to contribute back to the machine learning field to see what we can do for the general machine learning by the knowledge we learned from this specific kind of data set.
Great, thank you. Jesse, do you want to talk a little bit about handling and protecting electronic healthcare records or anything else?
Yeah, sure. I kind of want to amplify a little bit what Daniel was talking about. The hackers. It's kind of interesting. There's what I would call like loud attacks, and those are things like the Sony breaches that we've had. You see a lot of news articles where there's a data breach and some company like Home Depot has lost, almost 1 million records. Those are great because they're in the news and we can actually learn from them, which is great. So I've been in the healthcare space for a little while, and I was alarmed to find out that there's really not much media coverage when it comes to healthcare and security. You don't hear about hospitals, except for ransomwares and things like that recently. But you don't really hear about the breaches and the need for HIPAA security. And I was a little concerned about that, so I started doing some research. And what I found was the attack motive for hackers in healthcare space is a little different. Hackers in the healthcare space need to stay stealth. The way that I would describe this in another way is an attacker for healthcare that would want to steal records or do something, what they would need to do is they need to stay hidden on a doctor's workstation for a long time. It actually costs money for attackers to reinfect computers, to get discovered and things like that. So they've automated the process and they slowly leak out data. So when I found this, I was thinking to myself, how do we really gauge risk? It turns out that a good way of doing this is to actually go on the darknet markets and look for the data. So I found two patterns that I thought was interesting. One is, as I search, I noticed that a lot of times on the darknet they sell what they call fools. What a fools is basically a profile of an individual. It will contain current and previous addresses, names of children, social security numbers, really everything that you would need to spoof an identity. What was alarming, though, was I noticed that some fools also have a photocopy of your driver's license. And that was interesting. I'm thinking to myself, well, I get how a hacker could, take data from different sources and hack websites to get, a profile on you, but how are they getting a photocopy of your driver's license? One day I'm taking my son to get, his vaccines, new pediatrician, and they asked me for my driver's license. I hand it over. I kid you not, they took 2 copies of it and gave 1 copy to me, and I looked at it, and I said, this is exactly what those driver's license photos look like on the dark markets. So what I realized is that these attackers are actually practicing it a little differently than how we see it in the media. They're not trying to be discovered. They're not trying to become famous or make lots of money. They're in the long game, and that kind of changes it a lot, especially when you're talking about healthcare records. So then, when it comes to a company like Cario, we have over 35,000 doctors that use our software. We have about 150,000 users that, to include patients that access our software daily. Are there ways that we can ensure that our data is not ending up on a black market? Well, I thought of one good way. One way is weekly, I actually look on the black market, for patterns. It's actually part of my practice. I never thought I would do that as a security professional a year ago. It's just something that wouldn't have occurred to me that would be useful or a good use of my time. And then the other thing, it really boils down to segmentation. So what's challenging is the healthcare space is the information doesn't change often. If you have a credit card that gets swiped or something like that, your bank calls you in 3 or 4 days. You have to wait a week at the most, and you get a new card. You don't get a new social security number. Driver's license, you have to go to the DMV. Takes a very long time. So what's best for us is to make sure that we segment data, and we do that through encryption. It goes quite a long way, but it doesn't. What it won't do, though, is it doesn't address the risks at the client side. That's actually a new type of space, and this is one area where I really think web technologies are actually going to provide more safety for our end customers. So because our software is cloud-based, there is no local information stored on their PC. If they scan files, they have the ability to upload it instantly to our services. And there's no real reason to keep any files around. The last thing that I wanted to talk about was, there was, this morning I got up early just to, freshen up on some of this information that I wanted to present today. And I actually found out that, some of these dark market vendors actually sell like some of our competitors' software. So what's interesting is, the use of software on computers needs to extend not only to the workstation, but in the way that doctors can actually protect their own networks. And what I found is, moving data to the cloud allows us to really reduce that risk profile and keep things more secure. So,
great.
Okay.
Thanks. That's really helpful. Now, Aaron, I'm going to turn to you last, just because you were on the road and thought you might need a couple minutes to formulate. But what are your thoughts on trends, either in Internet of Things or anything else you want to talk about?
So Internet of Things is an interesting space right now. I mean, there's such a wide variety of products, devices, and problems as well. Just in 2016, we witnessed the biggest distributed denial of service, took down the whole East Coast, took down Dyn. People weren't able to resolve domain names. And that was all because of vulnerable devices by default. Many different manufacturers. It wasn't just one. It was a whole laundry list. So with that, I mean, what comes naturally is, let's say, certifications or benchmarks or type of regulated bodies, I guess you can say. So the medical industry, FDA, they're starting to pick up on this, and there's a lot of work being done in that space, and also nonprofits helping them out, like I Am the Calvary. They're trying to work their way over to connected vehicles in that space. So most of the car manufacturers in the U.S. have bug bounty programs and disclosure programs, so they're more involved as far as with researchers like myself or other ones who are interested in hacking their own gear, their own car. They even have security teams, let's say GM, Ford. I wouldn't say Ford, but like Chrysler, Tesla, those type of manufacturers. But just a general trend in that way, it's very, very interesting because, again, we talked about the DDoS aspect, but not only that, these embedded devices are everywhere. The lights on the streets, on the highway, again, vehicles, your own vehicle. I just purchased a Subaru that's connected. Literally in a week, I was able to remotely exploit chain like 8 different vulnerabilities, and you'll probably hear about it soon, but it's kind of interesting to see how much exposure there is. You can find a bug, let's say, in an Android app, an iOS app, the web app as well, and maybe like a setup app you will have to install on your computer. There's just such a wide variety, and also wireless. The wireless part's also interesting as far as an attack surface, because usually before there would just be Wi-Fi or 3G or 4G, but now you have different like protocols being built up, 802.11.p, other different 5Gs, whole bunch of different mesh networks. You have vehicle-to-vehicle communication, vehicle-to-infrastructure, and also you have new protocols for autonomous vehicles being created. So a lot of things are going wirelessly. But again, the attack surface is huge. But with regards to certification and frameworks for these devices, just today, actually, Underwriters Lab, if you ever look like on the bottom of a toy or a product, it'll say UL. So they have one called UL 2900. Today, LG, they have a smart TV. It's called, the software that runs in it's called WebOS. It got certified by UL 2900. It was the first piece of software. So it's interesting because for the consumer space, that is, there's not much push or regulation or any type of liability in that perspective or in that type of environment. So to have, I guess, the first type of product being or passing this type of certification is interesting, and it's good. It's a start. You'll start to think about PCI, credit card transactions, and how, I mean, now it's getting more serious as far as to the merchant level. I think this past year, like level 4 is now, PCI level 4, they have to basically have penetration tests, I think bi-yearly, twice a year before. Think about your subways getting security assessments every year now. Before they never had to. But with regards to other trends within IoT, I mean, you also have drones. So a lot of the work I do, so with Cloud Security Alliance, I am in an IoT working group, as well as I was a technical editor for a packet publishing book called Practical Internet of Things Security. I'm actually writing a book right now for packet publishing called IoT Pen Testing Cookbook. So it's basically how to pen test these IoT devices from software, hardware to wireless. So again, the attack surface is huge, and that's kind of the scary part. You think about 5 years ago, these little sensors or actuators, they were never connected to a network, nor were they ever built to be connected to a network, and now they are, and they're inherently vulnerable based upon the software they're running 10 years ago, a 10-year-old library, a 10-year-old package, 10-year-old Linux kernel, something like that, when there's already been over 300-400 public advisories on the software that's being run. So it's scary, but it's inevitable. All these devices are already around us. It's just they're just now having these extra add-ons, like smart modules is what they call them, or different. It's basically just another way to connect them to get an IP address or some sort of network connectivity. So, I mean, just keep an eye. There's definitely going to be more and more space or more and more research in the space. One area of interest, and I think we might talk about it after, would be ransomware. Ransomware is totally different for IoT than it is for an enterprise or any type of manufacturer, but I'll wait to talk about that later. But just some of the type of trends, though, again, the DDoS is huge. I don't think it's going to stop, but think about DDoS. Think about taking away the DDoS and just doing ransomware. Or just being silent, hiding in medical devices and not really knowing. There's no type of logging for medical devices that'll pick up this type of activity from a threat actor, malicious actor, or whatever it may be. Just to kind of add to Jesse's point about research and medical, we actually had a meeting yesterday at OWASP Los Angeles at Symantec, all about hacking hospitals from independent security evaluators. So these guys literally get medical devices, medical device manufacturers, and they just hack away is what the idea is. But there is some space there for learning. Just this past year, there's a post-market guidance document published by, I think, FDA for medical devices, as well as IEEE published Building Secure Medical Devices, and I think there's like a top 10 of best practices on how to build these devices, but not necessarily from a developer perspective, but more of an overview. But just to kind of piggyback on what Jesse was talking about. But again, some of the trends that are going on, there's definitely way more, but we only have limited time here.
Great, thanks, Aaron. So the summary is your smart TV, your refrigerator, your thermostat, and your pacemaker are not your friends at all. They will turn on you much like your cat. Sorry, I'm a dog person. One of the nice things about working in cybersecurity, the blessing and a curse, I guess, is that no matter when I speak anywhere, there's always something literally in the headlines that day that you can, no pun intended, piggyback off of. And just today, I read an article about one of the newest evolutions in ransomware. One of my favorite ones from earlier this year is that now they have ransomware as Ponzi scheme. So Does everybody know what ransomware is, by the way? Anyone doesn't? Okay. So ransomware is where a attacker gets into your computer, locks all your data down, encrypts it so you can't use it, and then wants you to pay Bitcoin to get your own data back. So one of the innovations recently was they give you two options. They lock up all your data. They say, hey, you can pay us in X amount of Bitcoin, or you can join our team. And you can use, I'm not making this up, you can use your computer to go out and commit ransomware attacks against others, and then give us a little bit of the VIG up the chain. You keep part, we keep part, and if you recruit, and you recruit down beyond you, you can get some bonus money too. So it's a way to further organized crime. The thing today, though, is apparently there are some variants of ransomware where they require you, so what is, you pay your Bitcoin, they give you a very long sequence of numbers and letters that allows you to decrypt your data. They're requiring you to do that last part by voice. So you have to read, X56075. And the article I read, researchers are wondering that that's clunky, it's inefficient, why would anyone do that? So when we get into our discussion here, anyone's thoughts are welcome. My view is, of course, they're trying to get all these voice samples. And what are they going to do with them in the future? Who knows? But as biometrics, including voice recognition, become a token, a way of decryption, they'll have this massive database of them. Anyway, let's talk about ransomware. I'd like to just open it up to the group and ask two things, really. One is, what is the machine learning aspects to ransomware? How could this either improve the viability of ransomware for the attackers or help us defeat them? And then secondly, Aaron touched on this a little bit, in the traditional ransomware, they lock up your data. And of course, the silver bullet antidote to that is you back up your data, you just don't pay them, and you get your data back down. Now, if you have sensitive information, sex tapes or whatever, then maybe that doesn't solve your problem. But that's a way to solve it until you get to the point where they're committing ransomware attacks against autonomous vehicles, against medical devices, where a backup is not going to help you. So I would say take either one of those in either order. Maybe we'll start with Daniel.
Well, actually, in terms of sharing an interesting story, I'd like to kind of just talk about another very interesting example.
No, you're not permitted to do that.
Actually, I was reading about this. It looks like there was a hotel in Austria which got hit by ransomware. Now look how this is taken to a different level. And their kind of room keying systems got hit by this nasty ransomware. And basically, this was a high-end posh hotel, around $500 a night, up in the very cold weather. And what happened was that this ransomware made its way through the system, basically rekeyed all the doors and locked them. And there was no way to reissue a key to get into your rooms. Now imagine...
Or out, right?
Or out, yeah, exactly. Depends. So imagine that situation. This took it to a whole different level. Now what do you do? Okay, we're talking about data. That's one thing. But when it starts affecting the real world, that's where things get interesting. It's like, are you able to overcome this? In the end, they were able to pay the ransom and get rid of that, but it was quite interesting to bring this up because we are starting to see, and I guess Aaron and the rest of the team will be talking about this and how they kind of adapt to the IoT devices and how these things that we interact on a day-to-day basis, they start being taken ransom in the same way. But basically, we've seen different variations of ransomware in the market, everywhere from very vanilla, traditional ones to more sophisticated ransomwares, like Bryan did mention about capturing the voice and having that prompt. But also something very interesting in the market, which it's actually, ransomware has become very, very sloppy too. Whereas encryption is something that it's easy to use, but it can go terribly wrong if you lose the key. And some of these encryption devices or mechanisms that they're putting into these new ransomwares, sometimes they buy these kinds of exploit kits or ransomware kits, and they deploy it. They have no idea how it really works, and they start encrypting people. And either they abandon the campaign and leave the person high and dry with their encrypted data, or it just basically doesn't work because malware also has computer bugs. So you start seeing these things hinder not only the detection, but the recoverability of malware and ransomware.
That's great. Yeah. Any other thoughts, Aaron?
Yeah, it doesn't have to, just keep in mind with ransomware, it doesn't have to be encryption. It could just be fear-mongering as well. It could be having a pop-up in your car saying to pay, $100,000 and your car is going to, brakes are going to stop, your wheel's going to turn. Same thing even with like your door lock at your house being locked out. It could just be temporary. It could just be games. But again, it doesn't have to be encryption, for example. It could just be just a pop-up or some sort of error message or some sort of just something to scare somebody. Because I know if I was driving in my car, I'd be freaked out. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who it is. Someone from the car manufacturer or someone actually an attacker. But again, I did give an example of smart locks and being locked out of your house or your rooms, and then we talked about hotel rooms. That was a pretty interesting story. I think it was last month or around November. But also your cars. Now when you have ransomware in your cars, not even getting into your cars, your vehicles, you have to get to work. The interesting aspect is the liability. As far as who you're going to call, who's going to fix that. How long is that going to be a problem when it will be a problem, when it does come about, because it will. It's almost inevitable how much of a problem it's going to be. But, I mean, with regards to thermostats in the smart home arena from ransomware, this was the first year it's been demonstrated at DEF CON, which is a big conference in Vegas, usually late July, early August timeframe. There was researchers from the UK. They ended up having, they located vulnerabilities in a thermostat, which were command injection vulnerabilities. So they were able to sideload the firmware on the device and effectively run ransomware in a thermostat. And they were able to spike up the temperature inside someone's house. And it could be just a prank, a college prank, whatever it may be. But think about, we live in California. We're pretty lucky. But think about, Arizona or somewhere where it's really hot, Texas. You have your grandmother in there or your grandfather, or maybe you're in an elderly home, any type of those places, it becomes a real problem. And you have smart locks, forget it, you might, pass out. I don't know what's going to happen. But it's an interesting problem. And again, I think it's, this was the first year that these type of proof of concepts have been created. It's just a matter of time. Like I said, I gave the example of instead of doing a DDoS, doing a mass distribution of ransomware for these devices, like your home routers. If you're locked out of your home router, you have no internet. Again, sure, you could press the button, but again, if you're trying to describe where the reset button, a little reset button for your grandparents or, whoever it may be, someone who's not tech savvy, it's gonna be a problem.
Well, I know my daughters would kill each other if they were locked out of the internet for more than 5 minutes at our house. You touched on the question of liability. I think that's a really important issue that cuts across all of these issues: Internet of Things, embedded devices, software development. And maybe it's just because I'm a lawyer, I'm focusing on that. But I do think there's a really important issue now about whose responsibility is it if you have a final device that embeds a video camera that has the Mirai software in it that's used to launch DDoS attacks. The first time this happened, you're probably going to get a pass, right? Because the companies will say, well, we bought this stuff in good faith. We didn't know that it was going to be able to be used to conduct attacks. But what about the next time? Companies that have not removed those pieces of hardware and that software from their devices are used to launch an attack. I can promise you that my friends in the plaintiff's bar, plaintiff's lawyers are figuring out right now ways to apportion liability between the original manufacturers and the importers and the assemblers and the final device sales companies. And so I wonder, I think we probably have some entrepreneurs and some business folks in the audience. I just think it's worth thinking about where should this liability sit, and how does a company that's upstream from the original device take measures through contracts or through testing or through other methodologies that would allow them to escape liability and, or more importantly, to protect the consumer and protect victims of potential attacks. And one thing that's been floated by folks like Bruce Schneer is the idea that these problems are too big and too important for any single company or any single group to be able to manage, and so therefore, much like with regulating healthcare, regulating food and drugs, you need the government to actually step in and take regulatory action. So I guess I think it'd be interesting to discuss. He's actually proposed that the government create a Department of Technology policy that would regulate, among other things, the Internet of Things, and would actually say, here's the legal standards. They're common across all the United States, unlike the breach disclosure laws where there's 47 different state laws that you have to comply with. If you comply with these, you get a safe harbor, presumption that you're not going to be found liable. If you don't comply with them, it's the opposite. So I just, as technologists here, I'd just like to get anyone's thoughts about what you guys think of this. Let's just start down here.
Yeah, sure.
Jesse.
So I'm actually a big supporter of government regulation. I know right now with our current administration that might not
Lock the doors.
Yeah, a popular topic. But I mean, we can see the success of it in a lot of things. You know, the FDA that you mentioned, Bryan, is a good example. You know, I just think back to the FDA. Technically, it started in 1909, right? But they didn't have much authority until right around 1938. And what was required to happen was a tipping point. And that tipping point was a pharmaceutical company that released painkillers for infants that made a lot of children sick. Basically, there was a loud public outcry, and immediately everybody got the act together and passed laws needed to turn the FDA into what it is today. And because of that, we have recall procedures that work well. We buy products such as salads and things like that that sit on shelves for a long time without the fear of getting poisoned. And, you know, I think in, 10 years or so, you know, we'll look back on this day and really take for granted a lot of the legwork that's taking place right now. I do have kind of a caveat, though. So when it comes to government regulation, you know, I still have a headache from HIPAA. It never goes away. And the reason for it is that, you know, sometimes they try to actually come up with the controls. You know, I don't think lawmakers are technical people. I don't think that they should tell us what encryption standard to use or, you know, how often we should have penetration tests. I think that can be left to the industry. But for the most part, I do think that we do need you know, overall higher level regulation to ensure that there is an incentive for companies to take the actions needed to protect the consumers, which is what this really boils down to.
Yeah, so the idea would be the regulation doesn't say you have to use this router. It would say you have to meet these operational requirements, and you have flexibility within that to meet them. Does anybody have a contrary view on the panel? Anybody think the government should stay out of it?
Yes, a little bit. I think what needs to be done is maybe not government per se, but maybe like some sort of independent audit. Like have a third party come and assess and give you an attestation saying, hey, like this device meets a certain standard. It's, you know, safe to be used in your house and so on and so forth. Because, I mean, you talked about the FDA, but if you look at other kind of policies and industries, we've seen that the government tends to be very draconian. You know, it's very rigid, governing with an iron fist, iron curtain. There's no way to kind of change things. And we're living in an age where, I mean, technology is rapidly evolving, changing, and modifying. So this sort of policy needs to be liquid enough to withstand the changes, or else what is going to happen is going to be legacy, and it's actually going to hinder the adoption and effectiveness of something like that. And imagine, you know, if like we've seen in like the Computer Abuse Act, sometimes like for security researchers to actually start poking around and testing, that they could be like civilly liable for certain things, for testing things which they can't. So I think it has to be more of an open discussion, maybe asserted by experts in the industry, like PCI. I have nothing against, nothing for or against PCI. Please don't see me the wrong way. But something of that nature, I think, would work better maybe than a governing body in the government. Because at the end of the day, it's all about money, and unfortunately, with laws and regulations, the only way you can kind of hold these companies, their feet to the fire. But there must be other ways, by imposing fines and not being able to do business. I think that would probably be something that would actively help the security posture of these companies.
Okay.
Devices.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I have some. So for the consumer space, for IoT, 2016 was a big year. And the reason being is because FTC kind of laid their hand down on D-Link and ASUS, and now for 20 years they have to get basically assessments and audited. I think D-Link's still going through theirs. I think in January is when they got the notification that they're being sued. But ASUS is one of them. But again, it's the first time that's ever happened. But as far as similar to what Daniel was saying, an external body basically setting almost like a baseline like PCI and testing third parties. I gave the example earlier that UL 2900, the first piece of software, was certified yesterday. That was like a big move because there's so many different certification bodies trying to be sprung up because they feel there is a need for IoT to have some sort of framework and certification, that there's not one that's adopted by the industry. And LG being a bigger manufacturer, that's why it was kind of a big deal. It's kind of shifting the game here. But there's also, again, FTC's placing, they have this whole IoT security challenge. I think it's, $25,000 or $15,000 for researchers to come up with a way to secure IoT devices better. And it all has to be within you as a consumer and your network, something that you can run and test your devices with. But they're getting involved and they're also laying their hand down, but also there's other changes in the industry going on, like UL 2900, there's also one called ICSA. There's a bunch. I mean, even us at Cloud Security Alliance, we're working together with other nonprofits to kind of spring up another framework. But again, everybody has their own work that they're doing and not working together almost. Some of them are pay to play. You have to be an organization, a big corporation, 20,000 to be able to talk to this group. And there's also ones that you don't have to pay, you just attend, and you can freely speak your mind, and everything's open. So with that, like UL 2900 is all one of those pay-to-play type of scenarios where I don't know what their tests are. I don't know if it's like, so if you ever look on a piece of software, you'll see it's Windows 7 certified, Mac certified, Wi-Fi certified. Those are just basically test cases that run and just checkboxes that come off on their screen, on the QA lab screen. I don't know if that's what the case is for UL 2900 because it's closed source. It's not open for people to view or researchers or people in the industry unless you're part of that kind of circle. So definitely interesting in the way it's going to go. I think in the next few years we'll probably have something more solidified in the consumer space, consumer IoT space. FDA and medical has their own. Connected vehicles will have their own. But I think general consumer products it'll start to pick up more.
Great, thanks. Well, we have, one more thing?
Yeah, just really quick. So I think we kind of play two levels of urgency when it comes to security and consumer products, because we talk about hotels and these problems impacting people's lives. One day, cars might get hacked. I think the level of urgency that's required for security isn't something that we want to develop organically. What I mean by that, it's like I wouldn't feel comfortable knowing that restaurants are, signing up and checking boxes with closed source standards that make sure that I'm sick or that the food won't poison me. I just wouldn't feel comfortable feeding my son, apple juice that had a label on it saying organic, but not actually meaning anything other than, a checklist of things. So I think there is value in having larger certifying bodies, weigh in on certain things like that. And I think where consumer health is concerned, we definitely see a strong presence of federal regulation. I think, once again, today with the Internet of Things, 2016 being a big year, I don't have many devices in my house, but I know that's changing in a few years. And when my safety is at risk, because of the devices that I have in my house, I definitely want to make sure that it's not, up to the vendors or manufacturers to make sure that my kids are safe at home when I'm not there.
Right. Thanks. So we have a couple other really cool topics like the feasibility of hacking our elections and the legality of hacking back if you're a private company, but it's 10 till 8, and so I want to make sure we have time for questions and comments from you all. So I think we'll forego those unless we run out of questions. Sir, is there a microphone? Yeah. Who's got a question that can shout really loudly, but while Chelsea gets the microphone? Sir.
There's loads of them, actually. We published one for Cloud Security Alliance. It was like 87 pages, 13 steps of future-proof in your IoT device, from development, from the beginning, from hardware to the life cycle of a device, from testing as well as threat modeling, and there's a lot. So that's this one's Cloud Security Alliance. Cloud Security Alliance. There's also others.
I think National Institute of Standards and Technology came out with a standard a couple of months ago, and probably also ISO.
Well, WASP also has a framework.
Yeah. So there are quite a few out there.
ISO's behind though. We're working with ISO. ISO SC27 is the group for IoT.
Right.
So they're still working on it.
Yeah, they're out there now. How specific and how universal they are is another question, but they're out there. In the back, sir.
Well, that was terrifying. So, as one of you mentioned, it does not appear that our political class understands the cyber very well. And these attacks are getting more and more brazen. I figure sooner or later we're going to have a version of a cyber 9/11 where it's going to justify a military response. How reliably and how accurately can we trace that attack to the right series of tubes so that we don't invade the wrong country again?
That's a great question, and not only because there's a major research effort underway at the Cybersecurity Policy and Research Institute on this very thing. You're talking about the problem of attribution. So it's widely believed that the United States took responsive, covert, secret cyber action against North Korea after the Sony hack. If North Korea conducted the Sony attack, and if our response was proportional under the laws of war, we're perfectly entitled to do that. If not, that was an act of war. When the Obama administration kicked 35 Russian diplomats out of our country, which I was in the CIA for 15 years, I believe that's more than we kicked out at one time during the height of the Cold War. That, again, perfectly justifiable diplomatic response, although I'm not sure it's proportional in the sense of hacking our election, if they did it. You can go find FBI DHS so-called JAR report that the administration put out right after that. It's 13 pages, 11 and a half of those pages are background material or cyber hygiene tips for companies. 1.5 pages go to this issue of attribution, publicly showing that it was the Russians that did this. Now, I was a KGB analyst for the CIA. I fully believe the Russians did it, mainly because this is KGB propaganda 101. Putin has an obvious interest in doing this, and he's all but bragged about it. But that document doesn't come close to proving it. There is a paragraph out of 13 pages that is supposed to be attribution, and what it is it restates a conclusion of CrowdStrike in one of their published open source reports where they looked at the code that they believe was used to attack the Russian artillery, attack Ukrainian artillery in the war with Russia, and they say, well, okay, Russia is the only entity that would have wanted to do that. The same code was used, therefore it was Russia. That does not cut it. I mean, first of all, that code was out in the wild. Anybody could have used that code. And second of all, just because it was used to attack the Ukrainian military doesn't necessarily prove it's Russia. Again, I totally believe it was Russia. I'm not a conspiracy denier in that, but that does not prove it. So that doesn't go, by the way, just for the laws of armed conflict and fights between countries. It goes to if you're an economic espionage prosecutor trying to prosecute a criminal case. It goes to if you're a private company trying to get your IP back. How can you publicly justify the fact that you believe a certain entity or person was was responsible for your attack. And I think that the state of the art, at least in the unclassified non-governmental world, is extremely weak. And so we're doing a project at UCI to try to do better on attribution. But you're right, at some point it's almost inevitable, especially now that the Russians, if it was the Russians, have shown that they can largely get away with it, that's going to escalate. And at some point this president or the next one's going to be faced with an attack that does rise to the level of an armed attack under the laws of war, and going to have to decide, like in our hypothetical, what to do about it. And I don't think we're remotely prepared to deal with that right now. Good news.
Also, if I may add just one thing
Yeah.
also, in terms of attribution, we saw the same thing with Stuxnet when it came out. You know, we didn't know who it was, if it was a nation state, if it was the U.S., in fact, or Israel, or a joint effort. But it was the same thing. Was this something that was developed by a nation state to actually go and execute a specific mission, or was this the act of another person, another actor in this space? We see also with the Mirai botnet, the IoT, you know, there's attribution that was developed by a hacker called Anna Senpai, and she or he was just fed up and just had cashed out, made their money, and made the source code public. So there's a lot of this thing in the cyber world of attribution, of saying, okay, who did this? Where is this coming from? Is this cyber war? You know, that's a term that's very, very loosely used. Is it in fact war, or is it espionage? You know, is it cyber terrorism, and is there a nation state behind it? And that's
and just to make this one more level of complex, there's a doctrine under the laws of war, laws of armed conflict, that says if you're attacked from within the territory of a particular country, and either that country's government is responsible for it, or they cannot or will not stop it, you still have the right to respond in an armed manner against that country. So this is going to get incredibly murky because, of course, every country is going to try to do false flag operations. You know, Russia's going to make it look like it came from China. China's going to make it look like it came from Israel, whatever. So it's a mess. Any question that might lead to some good news? Let's go back here. Yeah, if you can get the microphone to the second from the back row there. Or you can shout. Either way.
One thing I saw fascinating with a lot of companies nowadays are building out red and blue teams. And one thing, speaking upon war, I guess, are like capture the flag scenarios. Can you divulge some information on those two teams that companies are building out?
Yes, I would imagine, especially in the financial industry, we employ the whole red team, blue team. We have incident response drills and all sorts of things to mimic an actual attack, an invasion, a breach. And from there, we show all the escalation procedures, make sure that we're looking in the right places, but also like an active pen test that we do on a constant basis, because vulnerabilities come out. We need to see if they apply to our infrastructure, to see if we can use that to leverage and make our way into the infrastructure. And so it's a constant thing, and it's being more and more adopted in the industry. We're not only looking at defensive security, but we're looking at offensive security also. So thinking like a hacker, thinking like the person that's going to be breaking into your company, that's the mentality that we have to have. And
yeah, I would just say not only is that a best practice, but in many scenarios, in particular the Department of Defense acquisition regulations, it's actually required. So you have to obviously try to build security in by design from the beginning of your product design and development, but then you're required to actually do a cooperative security assessment, which would be where the IT or the owners of the systems and the IT security people that run a system know it's happening, know that you're going to scan them, they're cooperating with you, and then as a second step, at a different time, you are required to do penetration testing, red teaming, where they're not aware, and only senior most management is aware. So that's, I got to believe that's going to be required in many, many more regulations going forward.
I'm actually on a red team. So as a consultant, I get to pen test a lot of hospitals, insurance, loads of different industry verticals, but it's interesting when you have a guy who's an expert at basically lockpicking, a guy who's an expert at social engineering, basically exploiting people's trust, You have a guy, I mean, I'm doing the AppSec stuff, AppSec, so I'm doing all the web stuff, anything I can see that has exposure online. Then you have like a network guy who does all like the services, and so you have like specialists almost. And it is picking up, definitely, in different industry verticals as well, I can tell you that. Even from, I mean, I know the Sony breach totally spiked up entertainment industry, totally. So it's definitely an exercise that's done, and even bigger companies, they have their own red teams for internal assessments like Salesforce and the Facebooks, those type of companies, Microsoft, and also like Samsung's, they all have their own where they go around different business units and do red teams where they don't even let management know. It kind of just happens. So it's definitely something that's picking up.
I think we can probably take one or two more, sir. It's coming right there.
As we can see, hacking has become more and more sophisticated every day. So the more security you put, the more hacking you're getting, as far as I'm concerned. Now, supposing we get to a place where they can hack into all of your secrets, from another country, and you can hack all of their secrets in the other country. Couldn't you be optimistic and think instead of a war, they're going to have a peace and say, let's not have any secrets anymore?
Well, I may be a little bit biased on this question, given that I and 21 million of my closest friends got our top secret security clearance files taken by China out of the Office of Personnel Management. I'm skeptical. I understand exactly what you're saying. Universal transparency sort of negates the advantages and leads to peace. I'm a little skeptical about that. There was an American Secretary of State in between World War I and World War II that disbanded all of the United States' cryptographic efforts to break other countries' codes, and he very famously said, "Gentlemen, don't read other gentlemen's mail." And that did not work out so well. But there might be different views. Anybody?
Well, I spent a little time in the military. I was in the Marine Corps. And, there's actually networks that are completely air-gapped from the internet. And I just don't see governments ever really wanting to share anything that are on those networks. They spend a lot of money to make sure that nothing ever touches any public computers. We have computers locked behind doors.
Let's get that ransomware he was talking about. Plug it in.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, just to give you an obvious example, major powers obviously have nuclear technology secrets, and they have, whether they say they do or not, chemical and biologic weapons programs. I don't think you'd want to live in a world where we have radical transparency with regard to the ability to build a nuclear weapon or the ability to build a biological weapon that could wipe out the planet. Okay, we got time for one more. Yes, ma'am.
So we've talked a lot about technology, and I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal today, but Jeffrey Fowler, columnist, column was, "Your biggest online security risk is you. How do we address the human element?"
Absolutely no question about it. I mean, I'm a little bit out of the game, but I ran a law firm that did these for about 12 years, and I would say 85% or more of all the significant breaches were caused by either a deliberate insider or a well-motivated insider, but somebody that wanted to cut corners. I represented a whistleblower once where the CFO of his company ordered him to open a hole in the firewall so he could do TurboTax, and kid refused 3 or 4 times. The guy threatened to fire him. He documented it. He opened it, and of course they got breached. Or just social engineering. People who are well-meaning, but they just get tricked. And that, I mean, my opinion is there's a lot of technology fixes to some of that stuff, but it just really comes down at the end of the day to training and motivation. You have to motivate your employees to understand that they're not, if they're careless, they're not just hurting the company, they're hurting themselves. And then you train them and you test them, and you do your own internal red team phishing attacks and catch people and make it part of their job evaluation. But you're absolutely right. I think that's still the biggest problem, right?
Yes, that's exactly true, because what's being exploited today is not the latest version of firewall or latest operating system, which they are too, but what's being exploited today is the human mind, and sometimes we take that for granted. You are the best line of defense against a cyber hack. We are very curious. we are sometimes naive on purpose, and we click on things. We think we're going to get free iPads, and we think that, oh, yes, did this person really say that? Or let me have a look at this. And we end up wanting to have more power than the security model around us is able to provide. And we want to say, oh, I want to install this, I want to do this, and we just start clicking through it, and things happen.
From a different perspective, as far as a human problem, that's the exact issue of the whole IoT, consumer space, all these vulnerabilities and exploits running wild, is because these guys have been developers for 15, 20 years, never had any security training in their life, nor does the company have any incentive to give them training or pay for training for $2,000 for secure coding training or whatever it is. It's just not going to happen, especially if, again, you're writing in C, C++, or some other low-level language. You know, they do what works, and if it works, they just keep fixing it. And again, there's no incentive for these companies to pay in the consumer space for someone to get training. So that's another interesting aspect of exploiting a human in this scenario.
Well, we are well over time. Do you want to go ahead, Lee? You haven't had much of a chance to talk.
Yeah. Before I start to work in cybersecurity industry, I'm naive and innocent. I can plug in my USB device to any public USB port. But after I started working in silence and with all those security researchers, they hack everything, I start to be careful and think about the world is actually full of dangers. But think about the attack and defense thing. Let me think about machine learning in general. So for our machine learning model detect malware, what you do is basically you show a good file to the model and to see how it predict. If it predict bad, then you say, no, this is wrong, fix it. Okay, then you feed in next file until it converge to some stage. Okay, the model can classify good file and bad file very good, converge to accuracy. For the dangerous world with all the attacks, people attack, we defense, people attack, we defense. We are kind of like training a real general model. We try to make it converge to a robust and a safety world.
Okay, well, thanks to all our panelists. I, at least, will be in the bar for a few minutes if anybody wants to talk. I don't know if anybody else is going to be around, but thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Very good. Well, thanks a lot.